A gracious good evening, beloved rose hearts. Akasha is with you, and I call forth to each of you a mighty outpouring of my rose pink rays. May you be receptive and sensitive and open to receive them. We are just back from Mount Shasta. And on the Sunday of Mount Shasta, as more than 100 students joined in sacred circle, and both messengers were called into the center of the circle to assist, I did something that I do not do very often. And you have every right to inquire why I do not do that. And I reserve the right to know the right time to explain that to you. But let it be said and known that there have been times in the last 20 years where I have released an ample outpouring of the rose pink love. And the first time that I chose to do this was in 1997 in Mount Shasta, when your messenger was invited to introduce Akasha to the WESOC conference sponsored by Dr. Joshua Stone. I knew that in that audience of 2,000 students, people, they weren't all students, it was an interesting group of people from everywhere. Yet I knew that there was students, those who would become students. Your messenger was there for the first time. I knew that there was a magic merino in the office, in the audience. I knew who is one of our MCs today and musical presenters. I knew there was a Michelle Lenham from LA who has become a master teacher in the laws of manifestation in our student body. And that's just a tiny sampling. I knew Craig Chase, known as Yaj, who would become our first coordinator in Mount Shasta in 99 and 2000 and 2001. I knew they were in the audience, as well as many others. I knew that William and Judy were in the office. That word is stuck in the audience. And of course, Judy and William come from Michigan, and Judy is the assistant lead violinist in the orchestra, and she and William gave a wonderful classical presentation at the Resurrection Conclave this year. And I knew that this was going to be an opportunity for a lot of word of mouth. I knew that Jenny Miller, our Salt Lake City coordinator, was in that gathering. And so I released a wave of rose pink love. Some of you have heard the story, 2,000 students in this very large school gymnasium. And the love was so palpable and people could feel it. And when you are touched with that love that's out of this world, yet comes from source, it ought to bring up tears, because it is something you haven't experienced maybe for hundreds or thousands or even millions of years. The crowd was weeping as they were soaking in. And when I was finished and brought the messenger back in and stepped out, about 400 students, or 400 people lunged from their seats and moved towards the stage. The sound people, seeing what was going on, grabbed your messenger and said, "You're going out the back door," and pushed him out the back door, and he found himself standing in a farmer's field. And there have only been 4 other instances in the 20 years that I have released. I'm not speaking of a gentle wave of love that can comfort and nurture you. A wave of love that for you might as well be invisible, even though it's invisible. And that's part of my discourse this evening, about invisible and invisible. The 5th time that I had done this was in Mount Shasta on Sunday. And I said, it is time. And if the student body felt that they would honor this and love this, and the thing that I said I wouldn't explain all the reasons that I do not do this often up to now, but I said one of the reasons is that you do really for a being to pour forth from the height of creation. I don't draw that forth from our temporary home in the 5th dimension. That came from the central sun. And to do this, you have to have angels temporarily stand in for people until people have become illumined enough, anchored enough in their spirituality, that those ones can serve as pillars. Until that can happen, angels will stand in. But even myself, I must respect all cosmic laws. That's only allowed so many times. So one of the things that I have waited is there to be enough. Whether we are in Vancouver, or Toronto, or Calgary, or New York, or California, and all the various chapters and all the various student bodies, there has to be 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all it takes. Students who are strong enough to be a pillar, to anchor that. And I hope that number will increase. But I will tell you one thing, precious hearts. As long as you keep saying words such as, "Oh, I'm too sensitive to," and I'll let you fill in that statement. As a son, and nice to see you again because I've been away for 3 weeks. This is the 3rd week because I was doing duties on the other side of this universe. And I was so happy that a son reached in and brought something to your attention in the last 2 weeks. That something spectacular could happen at the Montreal Conclave in 2016. That with Jesus the Christ, that he could work with each of you and help each of you to demonstrate something powerful at the conclave. Now, for that to happen, a son had to make a point very clear to you. I'll get back to my son. And that was a realization sooner rather than later, even if the achievement's not there. But a realization that you will start growing in your consciousness, and that realization being that attaining the silence, the suspension of thoughts, the gap, and using the silence to get you there, that's one thing. And when it comes to being a fully actualized God being, That's really small stuff. Really small stuff. It's grade school. Mastery is when you can enter the gap. You can suspend your thoughts. You can enter the silence of your soul, your being, and unleash the power of God in the midst of the noisiest world all around you. That's mastery. And the son set himself. He didn't set a goal for you. He didn't even set a responsibility for you. He set a goal for himself. And all the ways that he will train and support you to realize, we will, when we go into the practitioner's treatment and when we, finish the self-talk and get into that, we use the silence. We'll bring the music right down. We'll support you. We'll shut everything off so everything is quiet so you can get into the silence inside your mind. Suspend thought. But realize that once you make that achievement, then you have to make that achievement at least 1,000 times. So that at the point, at any time, you've got a break at work, you go out to your car, you're at home, you say, okay, it's time to go into the practitioner's treatment and make sure the presence is flowing into my consciousness again. And every time you do, it only takes half a minute to get there. You have perfected the art of it. And then you're there, and all the spiritual alchemizing is flowing. God, the presence that knows only perfection, is flowing back into your consciousness. And the big realization that is waiting for each of you to have your aha is that God is infinite consciousness. I am the individualization of that consciousness. Therefore, my consciousness is as infinite as God's. Further reason why I understand Jesus' words, I and the Father are one. I am an individualized consciousness of the infinite. So a son feels that by 2016, that in the summer, your ability to sit down, do maybe 15 seconds of self-talk. Here I am, suspending all thoughts, making contact with God. God is a presence of perfection. I am suspending all thoughts, entering the gap. Peace, be still. God is mighty within you. That's how short your self-talk gets to. And the thoughts stop. And the gap is no longer 15 seconds or 1 minute. It's 5 minutes. It's 7 minutes. And when you're in the gap that long, the alchemical spiritualizing of your outer self is just off the charts and not of this world. The golden skin that cometh, the lost years of the locust, as that connects to the aging, just throws off. You reach a place where you know it is impossible to ever fear anything. You have the attainment that all consciousness is invisible. And you have the attainment that everything you see out there in the world, everything that is visible, started from the invisible. Everything. Even cement, the original elements, everything from the invisible. Where did that ore come from? Where did that apple tree come from? It came from the seed. Open the seed. Show me the life inside the seed. You open the seed. You can't show me the life inside the seed because it's invisible. Because what is invisible is consciousness. And when your consciousness is no longer fractured, you have the realization your spiritual attainment is sufficient. And the infinite consciousness is flowing into your individual consciousness. Then you are ready for the next big experience. Consciousness is not complete without taking form. May I have a nose blanket box? Oh, thank you. It's doing much better, but just in case. The thing to remember now is that all consciousness naturally seeks to take form. You did. Breathe in this statement. Just breathe it into yourself. Say it to yourself. Consciousness is what I am. Now, go ahead and pinch your arm. Form. Form. These days, and I will support a son, my responsibility in honing the inner activity with you is to help you into that silence, get you to relax, get you to understand that the 1 to 5 to 10 minutes, whatever it takes, of self-talk before the gap, that self-talk is to nurture the gap. And if you can't suspend thoughts, and thoughts keep coming back in, it means your self-talk wasn't sufficient. It wasn't rich enough. It wasn't deep enough. It didn't help you move into the deepest place of relaxation. So that self-talk is so important. We must never rush it. A year from now, you might have self-talk that is less than a minute. But now it may be anywhere from 10 minutes before you go into the silence. And it's the important things that's my responsibility to keep bringing to your awareness that's going to support that. A son's responsibility is, as that infinite consciousness of the presence starts flowing back into your consciousness, everything takes form. If you can realize that God consciousness is infinite, and if you remember that, as that consciousness bleeds into your consciousness, and you are very conscious that the higher is infinite, this is where it's just wonderful. Remember, in some of your self-talk, you might say, in truth, there is not God and I. There is only God. In truth, there's not consciousness and I. There's only consciousness. Consciousness is what I am. And you take that further. These are samples of self-talk. Depending upon your nature of work, you might say, in truth, there is not God and customers. There is only God. And God, consciousness, expresses infinitely. Now, if that gets into your consciousness and it is just flowing in the treatment, And you maintain that. You maintain that consciousness is infinite. It's flowing into your individualized consciousness. You've agreed. My consciousness comes from the infinite. It is individualized. But all that is of the Father is of the Son. That's said in religious terms. All that is of the infinite is of the individual. But the individual must claim it. And so here, if you were doing a treatment, you're aware. Let's say that you were just aware that there are some things in your life. You see, the nice thing is you don't have to deliberately take appearances into your treatment. If you do, you're advised to do it in less than 15 seconds. Part of your self-talk is you just might say to yourself, I am aware there seems to be a lack of investors. There seems to be a lack of customers. That's mortal mind and its truth and its belief in two powers. I'm aware that that is something that's acting in my life. There seems to be a lack of friends, a lack of investors. There seems to be a lack of customers. There seems to be a lack of opportunities. And I know that's what mortal mind does. And now I place all of my attention off of that. Because in truth, God is consciousness, and consciousness is supply. Consciousness is the customers. Consciousness is the opportunities. Consciousness is the friends. And consciousness is infinite. It's at that point that your reach, your platform of whatever is your activity in life, whatever is your career, goes global. Because your consciousness can reach right around the planet. But it takes you to have some attainment, to have some realizations, some spiritual illumination. And that's what you're doing here. And as you have that, and you hold that, and it's, for you, it's a given. When for you, you've come to the point where it's a given. God is conscious, consciousness is infinite. I am the individualization of consciousness. Therefore, the infinite nature of consciousness is what is acting in my own consciousness. You're putting all the pieces back together. In this year, you may go into the practitioner's treatment aware that there are 5, 6, 7 things in your life that you would like to improve. And you can just look at those for a few seconds. And then you say to yourself, you give yourself the instruction that's going to help you free yourself of the grip of mortal mind and its belief in two powers. Because if you're in the silence, you've suspended thoughts, and thoughts start occurring in your mind, and you're not thinking them. Where are those thoughts coming from? They're coming from mortal mind and this belief in two powers. And mortal mind is getting skunked right now. It's part of the insanity, and it knows that divine mind's coming back in. So you have an instruction. This instruction was given to you the last 2-3 weeks. Since I've been gone, perhaps I should pull in a sun on you and say to you, how many times did you give yourself the instruction, releasing yourself from all the problems mortal mind makes in your life? How many times a day did you do it? It was recommended 4 to 5 times a day. It's not an affirmation. It's not an attitude. You are instructing activity in your mental body. I consciously remove my health, my body, my life, my career, my world from mortal mind and its belief in two powers. And I rest, or I live my health, my body, my life, my career, my world in consciousness. Consciousness is God. God is the presence of perfection. You have to, you're rewriting code, precious hearts. You have to do that. You have to get that in 4 or 5 times a day. Do you understand? So we are restoring pieces. And the most beautiful thing is that I have to use a bit of a metaphor here just to make the intellect help. If there are 1,000 pieces to be restored, where consciousness, which is pure, not fractured, consciousness which is pure and infinite, is flowing back through your individual consciousness, if there is 1,000 pieces that have to be put back together, you only have to put about 82 of them back together again. Once you got enough of those pieces together, well, there's the power center of consciousness, and I don't think I've revealed it to you in this way. The power center of consciousness is pure will. Pure will is pure magnetism. It is the pure will at the core of consciousness that holds consciousness together and gives consciousness the ability to unfold infinity. In other words, the universe is inside consciousness. So, if at the core of consciousness is will is magnetism, so there must be a magnet. And there is. But not a visible magnet. An invisible one. And once you collect 37, 8 to 82 pieces together, pieces that were lost in fragment, and that's what we're doing. Week after week, we're giving you a piece. Here's a piece. Personal and direct contact with God is possible in the silence of a moment. God is a presence of perfection. There's 2 pieces right there. You only need to have about 82 pieces restored, but you got to fully understand them, you got to be using them. Then the core magnet at the center of your consciousness will just magnetize all the other fractured pieces back together again. And when that's happening, that's where the magic of being in the silence, thought is suspended, you start having a variety of things happen. I have sought to provide you some insight to the things that can happen. At the same time, the things that can happen are infinite. So all I can do is provide you some insight and to keep you encouraged and to stay out of fear. I've talked about the involuntary breath. I've talked about your eyelids are closed and you're seeing spheres of light, shadows of darkness. You're seeing the light start to eat up the darkness. You start having flashes of light that are so fast it's over as quick as it started. You start having different type of breathings that kick in automatically where you might just breathe 7 times nonstop. And there's another thing that happens, and the sun calls it the royal flush. Well, I'm not sure about men, but I know women would understand if I say, you know, when you have that flush feeling comes in, it can be so short. And I'm not talking about menopause, although there can be flush type feelings that come up, but it's a flush feeling and it's really quick. It's just like, and sometimes it can be heavy, sometimes it can be humid. But when the flush starts happening from within, it's what it is. Remember we said that as the consciousness of God starts flowing back into your consciousness, there are three activities. This is another piece. Three activities that will start to unfold. This is why you want to keep coming back. Keep coming back. The first activity is it becomes obvious to you that there is a divine activity, there is a divine something that's going on inside you, and it doesn't fit into any of the activity or medical or holistic things of the world. It stands on its own. So the first thing, you realize a divine activity is unfolding within you. You might in some moments, although you must stay in your body, you must not flow out. It's so important. There may be moments that you are so still. You are so in the center of the silence. And you start thinking about these treatments when you're out of the treatment. And you start thinking about that. How do I describe that? It's almost felt like I was suspended. I didn't even feel my body at some point. And these are the things that just keep coming forth every time you return to the silence. And of course, the qualification of this silence is the absence of thought. Further qualification, the purpose of the absence of thought is to enter into the silence of the moment. Further qualification is to make personal and direct contact with pure consciousness, God, a presence, and get that flowing back into your consciousness again. So these are all the pieces, precious hearts, that you are connecting together. So, three dynamic activities are obvious to every student. Every student might have their own interpretation of what's happening, but they will come under three classifications. When you're in the silence, it is obvious there is a lot of spiritualizing, there's alchemizing, there's energetic feelings, vibration, there's flashes of light, there's illumination, there's cranial cracks going on. You really get into it, there's intense surges flashing into the different organs. And then when you're not in the silence and you have this continuity, you see that activity come into your outer life. You notice your appetite is changing big time. You might even get an instruction. You might have a day off and an inner prompting says to you, get out and go and stand in the sun right now and eat the spiritual nutrition from the sun. Breathe it in. The promptings will be so fast, so fast. As all of this happens, the next thing that happens is the substance. This consciousness that is rushing in. Remember, your body's made of form, yes? Now it seems to you that you can use it, you can work with it, but it seems that your invisible body, that your mental body's invisible. You can feel it, you can make yourself feel, you can pour feelings, but it seems to you your feeling body is invisible. They're not. They are functioning. Your mental body interfaces. It does a matrix with the brain. It interfaces. If your sight vibration was higher, you'd see it. You'd see these magnificent platters that form a magnificent dome around from the shoulders, extending out about 18 inches and coming back above the head. Mental body. The feeling body connects to the solar plexus, spirals around the physical body. It's beautiful. A sun showed your messenger the feeling body. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. But the vibration of those two bodies is much faster than the vibration of your physical body. So you can't pinch your emotional body. Or you can't pinch your mental body. Or can you? You can. But until you get to a higher vibration, you can't sense that. You can't use your faculty to sense it. If you pinched gently, just like a love pinch, your mental body, you will hear a high, almost like a child or puppet sound. Ah! If you pinch your emotional body and it's a love pinch, how do I describe this? Imagine a very, very large body size Santa Claus Christmas stocking. You get that in your mind? Body size. If you pinched, a love pinch, your emotional body, it would feel like a suit Santa Claus stocking is just coming around you instantly and holding you so closely within. What's the message? Your body's the gift. So these are just, so when I said there's three activities, divine activity, the next is substance. That substance flowing through your consciousness interfaces with your mental body and your emotional body first, and then makes contact with your physical body. And that could all happen in about 18 seconds. And when it does happen, it's what a son, you'll hear him call the royal flush. And you just have this flush feeling. And well, gentlemen, I'm not going to explain it by more. And if you need more explaining, you should just go up to any of the ladies here and they'll give you an understanding. So we have the interactivity, we have the substance, and the third activity we talked about. You realize how everything in your life is being impacted. Everything in your life is being corrected. Everything. And you got to watch yourself. You got to tell yourself, now don't fall into the trap. Don't think that God's correcting yourself. No, it's that you have once again made your consciousness one with the infinite. And the infinite consciousness is a presence that knows only perfection. And so when it flows through that substance, anything that touches it that is imperfect, it just corrects it faster than a blink. So it's not like it's doing some favor for you. It's you that came home. I keep seeking to emphasize that is important, because you are going to see improvements big time. Now here's the thing to remember. If you see improvements and you're going into the treatment, going into the silence, it's a regular thing you do. It's not a choice anymore. And you love it so much that you can't wait to go back in. And if you see a lot of improvements, and then if there's a leveling off of those improvements, you know right there, okay, I need to check myself out. I need to check the psychology of my own being. What message am I thinking that I've got all these improvements? Look what God's doing for me, because they'll shut down right there. Because that's an error in thinking. No, you got back into the consciousness where only perfection exists. So in the world of form, as that consciousness bleeds into the world of form, everything gets corrected. But you must not think that God's doing something special for you. Because if you do, it'll just stop. Because that's an error in thinking. An error in thinking is a fracture. A fracture will cover over or will push out that influx of infinite consciousness entering into yours. Okay? That Okay, let's connect that to a religious piece. Jesus admonished his disciples and got after them several times until he drilled it into their heads. Why calleth me good? There is none good but God. Let's say it differently. There is nothing good but consciousness. And that is a good that's beyond the good and evil. So Jesus knew he could not take credit. So this is where you all have to make peace with personal empowerment versus spiritual empowerment. And that's a subject that I'm not ready to address with you. But at some point, you're going to have to make peace with it and know the difference. You can go to Mr. Anthony and Robbins and you can take some wonderful personal empowerment courses and get all the right attitudes, and yet I assure you that Anthony Robbins in the last 13 months has gone through a spiritual awakening. And that spiritual awakening, only his presence can teach him to what he does with his work, because his next level of growth is you can enjoy all the glamour, you can enjoy all the material things, but once those things are attached to your name, then all of a sudden everything can start failing. And so he has a cathartic moment coming up where you can enjoy all the glamour, you can enjoy all the riches, all the material, but you have to know it's consciousness. And you say, well, I'm conscious. Yes, you are intellectually, you know that, but are you acting it 100% of the time? When you're acting it 100% of the time, your transfiguration is over. You've arrived. So Mr. Robbins has already had a whole amount of spiritual awakening in the last 14 months, and I can tell you that he is in deep meditation as to how he moves his clients from a state of personal empowerment to spiritual empowerment. Because in personal power, you must take your power back. You must take the will that you gave away to the world, power that you gave away to others. You must turn around your attitude. You must be excellence must be your motto. You must succeed to win. All these things that are a part, they are the best of human consciousness with enough growth pattern to make it work. Growth pattern is coming from consciousness. There's enough there to make it work. So this world class, he is the finest in his work, in his category. His life coaching, you all understand who this gentleman is? So now, with what's going on, and he has not made this public, he has to find the bridge between keeping to encourage his clients' personal empowerment and how you bridge that to spiritual empowerment. Well, you've already done it. You might not have used millions and billions to do it, but you used the world experience. You used the world of experience. You took your knocks. You did it the hard way. You often did it on your own. But wow, when the presence begins to talk to you in the silence, there is such a huge message waiting for you. When the presence says, I gave you a mind. I gave you a heart. I made you the individualization of me, yet you would make your own choices. I meant you to do it on your own. I know. You went out and did it on your own. But I never intended you to cut off your life force. I always intended to be your lifeline. I always intended that you would go out and be on your own and make whatever you wanted to make of your life. But I never intended that you would cut off my lifeline. I love you so much that whatever you want to go in the world, you want to do it on your own. I'll make sure you have health. I'll make sure you have opportunities. I'll make sure you have money. I'll make sure you have supply. I'll make sure you have everything. And then the present's going to say to you, that's what happened. You went out and did it on your own. That's the fall from grace. But the way you approached it, you didn't realize you cut off the lifeline. And you've been through hell. And now you're coming home. And the present says, and I receive you. But realize you can't break the lifeline. All you can do is be hypnotized into believing you're separate. And if you're separate, you've severed the lifeline. I told you all that I have is yours. My inheritance is infinite. You can never run out of it. Your inheritance. That is a huge message. And it's a huge message that is a piece for each of you right now to realize that's another piece. Because you've all answered, and you know that you've all asked the question, and you know you've gotten some answers, but not one that's really fed a good comprehension. When you said, why would we do that? Why would we fall from grace? Why would we go from accessing our higher intelligence and creating perfect worlds? Why would we do all that? Why would we make things more difficult? Well, we're told we decided to be masters, make it a little more difficult for each other. Well, that fits a little bit. Was it part of the... Have you ever asked yourself if, for your race of people, if the fall from grace, as we term it, that happened 12.5 million years ago, have you ever asked your heart and not let your intellect grab it and try to answer it and just leave it there for months if necessary? Was the human race fall from grace? Was it intended? Was it part of the divine plan? Was that 14 million years? That's in human time. I wonder how long that is in universal time. I will tell you, precious hearts, the time that is used in the fifth dimension and greater stratospheres, time that is used in other planets, every planet chooses its own time matrix. The time that we use inside the great central sun, we determine that. It's a formula that's convenient for us. But universal time, the movement of planets and galaxies, no accidents, everything in a state of precision. What would this experiment of 12.5 million years of fall from grace, how long would that be in universal time? Do you think that any master has dared to answer that question? Is it perhaps more familiar to you that you've heard things like, well, when it's all said and done, and you're back to being the individualizations of God's ascended beings, this 15-year venture down on the earth plane would be like a blink of a moment. That's how fast it went. So, how fast is universal time? Is there a formula that you can apply human time? Is there a ratio formula that you can apply that in universal time and say, okay, the fall from grace happened 12.5 million years ago, and 12.5 million years have passed for human beings, but in the universal time, I'm not saying maybe it was only 3 days. You can squeeze a lot into 3 days, precious hearts. A lot. So, with the way I've chosen this, carry this conversation, the last piece of those 3 activities is the things that are going on in the world, they just don't touch you anymore. It's like a different laws governing your life. Even human laws don't seem, government laws don't seem. Let's say that 2 years ago you got done something that compels you to be in front of a magistrate or a judge. You know how things take long it takes to get your case in court, right? And let's say you didn't do something criminally, but you did something stupid that in the end was a small crime. And that was 2 years ago. And 8 months from now, you finally get in front of the magistrate. And the infinite consciousness is just flowing through your consciousness. And it's just wrapping itself around the consciousness of the judge. The judge calls you and your lawyer and the prosecutor up to the bench and says, "Are you kidding me? You're bringing this before me? You're wasting my time?" To the prosecutor, "Haven't you ever made a mistake before? Get out of here. You're just not subject to the laws of the land, the laws of human creation, the sinister force. Those things just don't touch you. They just back off." And so the third activity is that there is a new law that governs your life, and that is the Christ that knows only perfection. You are well in the opening days of your attainment, leading into experiential activity of being an untouchable. God bless you, precious hearts. I've gone over half an hour. I have chosen to leave it with the Son to speak into, what's that? Shasta and Marilyn, and he has the ability to ham and play it up. Oh, precious hearts, there's something I said in Mount Shasta. So I'm going to pull all liberty of the great central sun and all rights of a woman who's married, and I'm going to say, when you hear what I said in Mount Shasta, and now I'm saying it as hearsay, so it's not me saying it now, right? Right? Would that be correct in your world? So when you hear me in a very soft discourse talking about the little bastards, I just want you to know a son made me do it. He bet me. And I've always said that's one thing you don't get to do, but he found a way of doing it. And he bet me. But you know, that point of the discourse was so soft and gentle, and I just let it out just like that. Yeah, the little bastards. I think everyone's eyelids were up in the ceilings, because it is not my role to say naughty words. I'll leave that to a son to some degree. I thank you. Please take 15 minutes and come back with the sun. But I will finish one piece. And I was speaking of the great waves of rose-pink love from the great central sun. There are a number of reasons that has only occurred 5 times. And the students were weeping in the circle in Shasta. And then what I did at the end, there was at least a half a dozen students that came up to your messenger and said, before Akasha said, look down, they're invisible, but there's a bouquet of roses at your feet. Lean over and pick them up. At least a half a dozen students said their sight opened for just a few seconds. They knew those roses were there, as well as they were basking. So I didn't reveal all the reasons why I don't do this very often up to now. But one of the things that I've always required is very, and it's a convenient word, you understand it, very grounded students that can be, and they're not announced. They're not announced. Anyone knows whether they have the ability to be an anchor, to be a, what was the word I use? A pillar, you know, to anchoring that in. And I have to say one last piece. I spoke of sensitivity. Years ago, I said, I know that your levels of sensitivity often worked against you. It was painful. However, in everything you've healed and everything you've transformed, it is so wonderful to be sensitive. Because how can a hardened heart and an outer self that is so dense, how are you going to pick up that an angel just walked in the room if you can't yet see her? It's your sensitivity that you know. Someone's just walked in. A son's here. I just know he is. It's not something of the mind. It's a sensitivity, and every one of your faculties are engaged so fast. That's what I've waited for. Where you will never speak negative about your sensitivity. That you will never, ever find yourself saying, oh, I'm far too sensitive for this, that, or the other thing. Because sensitivity, your shields of light will protect your sensitivity, yet your sensitivity is so important in keying into the higher vibrations even of your own spirit and soul. God bless you. And one final, I did say to a son, technically I did not swear. If you go to the original Mr. Webster's dictionary, a little bastard is a child that is born from a couple that have not been in wedlock. So I did not, technically I did not swear. And I said to his son, although it displeases you most, my love, I always win. Namaste. We love and bless you, Mother Akasha. We are so grateful for your presence with us today. Deep breath.